Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you guys an update on my 2 avocado plants here. So it's been over a year now since I've done an update and there's been quite a lot of growth in them. A lot of things to go through, tell you what's happened to them. So basically these have been growing mostly in my old flat where it was a north facing window. They were struggling quite a bit for light. I did spend a little bit of time on my south facing window when it was winter time, but a lot of the time it was on the north facing window, so they weren't getting a huge amount of light. That led them to grow quite large, lush leaves. You can see here, these are the ones from previously. Now these leaves unfortunately have been damaged because they were growing for so long in a low light environment, and then they were taken here, which is now a sunny conservatory, and the very intense sunlight scorched the leaves. So you can see there's a bit of damage from the scorching, from just too much sunlight. It's basically got a sunburn. They've come through that though, and they're doing quite well. Now the Fuerte variety is the one in the bottom here. This Fuerte variety seemed to not get too badly affected by the bright sunshine. It was in a slightly less sunny position, but it's come through fine. But this is a Hass variety of avocado. It definitely did get burnt by the sunshine. So as I say, it's been over a year since the last update. In the last update I repotted them, put them in better compost. So but they're desperately needing to be repotted again as they've grown a huge amount. This one here has the top got slightly damaged and it's starting to branch now, so you can see there's quite a few new shoots starting to appear from that. And I'll show you the difference between the leaves as well, because it's quite interesting to see what's happened with how much the leaves adapt to the environment. So basically if I go down lower, I show you these lower leaves. These are the leaves it had when it was in a low light environment, but it had good amount of feed and they had been recently repotted. So since the last update it put on a huge amount of growth. It probably doubled in height. Put on all these really big lush leaves. They did look really nice, but they've now been damaged by the sun, so they don't look as nice anymore. And the very long leaves, quite lush. It did grow quite fast. But then the growth started to slow down because it desperately needed repotting, so the roots didn't have enough space to grow. They also couldn't absorb enough nutrients, so the plant really started to slow down. And you can see these leaves up here started to get smaller. But if I pan up even higher, you can see there's actually some really quite small leaves. These are these ones underneath. You can see it was growing lots of tiny little leaves, and it was most of the new leaves until about 2 or 3 weeks ago with this size was very small. Then 2 or 3 weeks ago I gave it a very high nitrogen feed, and you can see these massive new leaves starting to grow now. So it's interesting to see how much of a difference giving it a high nitrogen feed makes. So going forward, what I might do with this plant, because I'm not going to grow any avocados on it, or at least I'm not expecting to be able to grow avocados here in Scotland, I might just grow it as a nice foliage plant. And looking at how much these leaves have grown already, just with being pot bound but given a high nitrogen feed, I'm quite excited that I might be able to get some really big giant leaves on this plant. So what I'm going to do with this avocado is I'm going to repot it today so it has enough space for its roots to grow, and then going to give it a really high nitrogen feed. I'm just going to keep it really well fed for the rest of the summer and see how big I can get the leaves to grow. It should do quite well here. The previous environment it was in was the flat. It was always around 18-20 degrees Celsius, quite shady. But here in the conservatory it gets up to 30 most days when there's sunshine, around about 20 degrees at night when I have the heating just to stop it getting too cold, and it gets full sun from midday all the way to evening, so it gets plenty of light, lots of heat. It should grow really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how well this one grows. There's also a bit more headroom now, because before it was on a windowsill I couldn't actually let it grow any taller, whereas now you can see there's quite a bit more headroom for it to grow, so it's going to get a decent size. The pot I'm going to be putting this into isn't going to be its final pot. It's currently in a 3 litre pot, and it's going to be put into a 10 litre pot today, so it's going to be getting a lot more growing space, just over 3 times the amount of growing space. That should give it a real boost. What I will do is I'll put it into probably a 30 litre pot in a year or two's time. That'll be its final pot, as I can't keep giving it a bigger and bigger pot because there's no space for a full-size tree in here. But I will do that final repotting in a year's time. So this is just a temporary plastic pot for now. I'll probably put it in one of the nice without watering pots in the future, just so it's easy to look after, and so it's got loads of space for its roots to grow and I can get it to its full potential. I might at some point also cut it back hard, because that will encourage it to reshoot, and I might get some larger foliage that way. At the moment it's branching, and normally if you have it branching you're going to get smaller foliage. Although I will let it branch for now, I might at some point cut it back and then thin it down to one shoot and that way it should get larger foliage. But at the moment I'm quite liking how it looks with the one stem and then splitting off into 3 or 4 other stems. At the moment there's 4 stems, but one looks like it's been outshaded by the other 3, so I suspect it will just keep the 3. The other one will probably stay small unless I do some pruning. So I'll just leave it like that for now. 3 shoots on the top. It's a nice shape, and when it gets to the height of the ceiling then I'll start thinking about pruning it. But I'll now talk about my other avocado plant here, and this is the Fuerte variety of avocado. This one's different to the Hass variety in that the avocados have the skin that is smooth and green. They're quite different in looks, and the flavour is slightly different. I find these not quite as nice, not quite as rich and creamy as the Hass avocados. This variety was grown at the same time, and I think there's maybe some genetic deformity in this plant, because at first I thought it was just growing badly because of the soil. I've amended the soil in the last video, and that did make a big difference. The leaves are no longer looking mottled. You can see some of the older leaves down here. I've got that appearance from when it was in the old compost. All the new leaves though are coming through nice and healthy. So I've amended the soil, that's improved its health. But it's still growing in a very strange way. Basically it seems like the stems don't thicken up, and the stems don't have any woody material in them. So this stem is incredibly flexible, it's very thin, and it just keeps falling over. So you can see here how flexible this stem is. It's almost like willow. It's just completely flexible. You can see you can bend it around. There's no sign of it snapping because it's not brittle. There's nothing stiff in the stem. It's like there's no lignin being formed. So I'm wondering if maybe there's some kind of genetic abnormality where the lignin's not being formed properly and it's just producing this almost like a trailing plant. Because the Fuerte variety, I knew it would be different to the Hass variety, but I don't think the Fuerte variety has no lignin in it and it goes completely floppy like this. I think it does have still some woody stems so it can grow as a tree, because this plant will never grow as a tree as it is. It's too floppy, it's just going to fall over. So what I'm going to do is give this a bigger bamboo cane to try and hold it up a bit better. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this one in the future. I might even grow it as a trailing plant. I really don't know, because it's definitely not growing as a tree. It's too floppy for that. There's just no strength for the branches at all. I'm not going to repot this one today either, because it's growing quite a lot slower. I'm just going to prop it up, see how it does. And because it's fallen over, what's happened is all the growth hormones go to the highest part of the plant, and that's where it puts on its growth. So that's why when it's fallen over here, it's putting all the new growth from these 3 shoots, which are at the highest point of that side of that main stem there. So when I put it back up again, these will probably slow down their growth, and the growth should start to become stronger again at the ends, as they'll be at the highest point. So as I say, I don't know what I'm going to do with this Fuerte variety. I might just keep it as an oddity, as it is an unusual plant, the way it just kind of grows as a climber or like a creeper. It's just going to grow along the ground pretty much by the looks of things. But I'm going to keep it held upright, see if there's any chance of it getting a stronger stem. If not, I'll just have to think of a new way of growing it. So I'm now going to go ahead and repot this Hass avocado. I might in a few weeks time take off these lower leaves, because they're really starting to look quite ugly now with the scorching from the sun, and then just allow the main leaves at the top to survive. It's going to have a bare stem, but I don't mind that too much. I'm going to have a nice bare stem and then lots of giant leaves at the top. For now I'm going to keep the leaves though, the reason being I want it to absorb as much energy as possible from the sun and put all the energy into the giant new leaves to get them really big and going. And once the leaves at the top are really big and it's got enough energy coming in, I can then remove these and just improve the appearance of the plant. So I'm just going to take it out of the pot now. It's been in here a year or so. You can see a lot of the roots are in the surface. It's very pot bound. It could be a bit tricky taking this out. So I'll just see how I can get on, try and ease it out. So unfortunately it does look like it's too difficult to pull out the pot. So what I'm actually going to have to do is cut this pot out. It's been in here so long, it's put a huge amount of pressure onto the pot, because as the roots grow they expand and put more and more pressure on the pot. If this was a terracotta pot it might have even cracked, if it was a thin terracotta pot. As it's plastic it hasn't broken, but it's incredibly high pressure now. I try and pull it out. I've even hit the sides, try and loosen it up, using the usual techniques to try and ease it out. But it's really solid. So I think I'm going to have to get a knife and cut this out. And as you can see there, it is really pot bound. Lots and lots of roots absolutely crammed against the surface. There's not actually any big roots though, so that's a good sign. If there's big roots I would have cut them off and removed them. It's just lots of small feeder roots. I am tempted to maybe cut some of this off. I think I might leave it this time, But next time I repot it, I'll probably take some of these roots off, give it some root pruning. It looks like it could do with some root pruning in the future, but as they're all healthy roots, I'm going to keep them as they are and just put that in the new pot as it is. So the avocado plants have really been enjoying the compost mix I gave them last time, which was a mixture of multi-purpose compost, a tiny little bit of loam, a bit of orchid compost as well, which was bark based just to keep it nice and loose, and also some perlite. Now this time I haven't been able to get my hands on any bark based orchid compost, so it's not going to be quite as good as the previous mix. This is part of the reason why I'm quite happy to do some root pruning the next time I pot it on in about a year or two's time. And when I give it a final pot, I'll give it a really good mixture with the orchid bark. But for now, I'm just going to go with a similar mix, but without the orchid bark. I've just put in a little bit extra perlite. Avocado trees like quite a loose compost. They like to be able to put their roots through nice and easily without anything inhibiting it. They need enough drainage as well. So that's the Hass Avocado now in its new pot, and it looks much better size for the size of the plant. To be honest, I could go with actually a much bigger pot for this size of avocado plant, but because it was already in such a small pot, I don't really want to go much more than 3 times the size. So that's what I'm just going to go with for now. But I reckon in a year or two this will need to be potted, because as you can see, it really is quite a big plant for the size of the pot. Now, as I said before, I'm going to give this very high nitrogen feed, see if I can really encourage even more of these giant leaves to form. It should do really well now. It should put a lot of energy into new roots, get its roots established, and then put on some really big nice leaves. So it'll be interesting to see how well that does. And then as for the Fuerte avocado down here, I've tied it up a bit more securely, but you can still see it's quite lax. It just kind of flops over. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. As I say, I just have to make a decision if I'm going to keep that as a kind of like a tree kind of supported by bamboo canes, or if I'm going to maybe even have it as a trailing avocado plant. I'm really not too sure, because at the moment it just doesn't seem to be growing well no matter what I do. At least it's putting on new shoots, and at least the leaves are healthy, but the stems themselves are always really weak. And even though we're in this bright environment now in the conservatory, the stems are still quite weak, because sometimes you can get weak stems if there's not enough light and the plants are searching for light. But this has had plenty of light for the last 6 months or so, and it's still got these weak stems. So it's very strange what's happening with that. But that's all for this update, and I'll give you guys an update probably towards the end of summer, hopefully. We'll hopefully have some giant leaves on this Hass avocado. The Fuerte probably won't be much to see on that, because it's just going to continue growing in its unusual manner. But this avocado here, I suspect it will put on a huge amount of growth, and will hopefully have some really big giant leaves that are even bigger than the ones that it had previously when it was repotted last time.